I'm going to keep this straightforward because the biggest hurdle when you're looking at a 75-inch commercial-grade screen is deciding whether the hype actually lines up with what you need day to day. If you've ever stared at a billboard-sized TV in a lobby and wondered if it's worth the space, the price tag, and the effort to mount it, this review is for you. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the thing that trips most people up with a display this size is the installation reality. At 28.5mm, the panel is marketed as ultra slim, and it really is about the thickness of a thick paperback. That does make it easier to fit into a recessed wall cavity or a tight mounting bracket. But the trade-off is that the rear housing is almost entirely a heatsink slab. In a commercial setting with constant on-time, you'll need a well-ventilated wall cavity or an external vent. I've seen a few small office installs where the back panel was directly against drywall, and the unit ran hotter than expected, which can shorten lifespan despite the 3-year warranty. The screen's dynamic crystal color promise sounds impressive, and in practice you do get a richer palette, roughly a billion shades, according to Samsung. That's noticeable when you're displaying brand-consistent graphics, like a retail store's color-coded signage or a museum's high-resolution artwork. The colors stay vibrant even at lower brightness levels, so you can run the screen at a modest lumen setting and still look good in a dim hallway. However, the same technology can be a double-edged sword in bright ambient light. Because the panel is thin, it doesn't have the same anti-glare coating thickness you find on thicker commercial models. In a sunlit atrium, the image can wash out and you'll need to crank up the brightness, which then eats more power and can cause the heat issue I mentioned earlier. Now let's talk about the Quantum Processor Lite 4K. It's a scaled-down version of the processor you find in Samsung's flagship consumer TVs. For static signage, think company logos, schedule boards, or looping video ads. It does the job. The upscaling works well enough that a 1080p source looks decent on the 4K panel, and the motion smoothing is subtle enough not to make corporate content look artificial. The downside shows up when you try to use the screen for interactive applications like a touch-enabled kiosk or a live-feed newsroom wall. The processor isn't built for low-latency input, and you'll notice a slight lag between a touchscreen tap and the visual response. If your use case depends on real-time interaction, you're better off looking at a dedicated interactive display. One of the selling points is the Home UI that Samsung tucks into its commercial line. It gives you a simple, TV-like interface for switching inputs, adjusting settings, and scheduling content playlists. It's handy if you're a small business without an IT team. You can pull up the menu with the remote and schedule a playlist to start at 8 a.m. daily. But that same simplicity can feel limiting for larger enterprises that need granular control over content management, network security, or remote firmware updates. The UI doesn't integrate with most digital signage management platforms out of the box, so you'd either have to rely on Samsung's own cloud service or use a separate hardware player, which adds cost and complexity. So, who should actually consider putting this 75-inch sign in their space? If you run a boutique retail environment, a gallery, or a small corporate lobby where you want a sleek visual centerpiece that can display high-color accuracy static or looping video content, the ultra-slim profile and vivid color reproduction are real advantages. The 3-year warranty also gives a bit of peace of mind if you're not planning to replace the unit annually. It works well when you have a controlled lighting environment and can afford a little extra ventilation space behind the wall. Who should walk away? Large-scale venues that need constant, high-brightness output in bright daylight, like stadium concourses or outdoor waiting areas, will likely be disappointed. Also, any operation that relies on touch interactivity, real-time data feeds, or deep integration with third-party signage software should look elsewhere. The processor's modest performance and the limited management UI become bottlenecks in those scenarios. Finally, if you're budget-sensitive, the price point of a commercial-grade 75-inch screen can be steep, and with a 2.8-star rating from a small pool of reviewers, you should anticipate at least a few hiccups that may require additional accessories or service calls. From a value perspective, the real money saver is the panel's thinness. It lets you mount the screen without a bulky bracket, which can be a big deal in historic buildings where you can't alter the facade. The color fidelity also means you won't need a separate color calibration service for brand-critical visuals. But those savings are offset if you have to invest in extra cooling, a more powerful media player, or a higher brightness setting to combat glare. The warranty covers the panel itself, but not the ancillary cooling or mounting gear. So keep that in mind when you're budgeting.